State of Play now, and joining me is Stephanie Hansen, former Newcastle County Council President, now with the law firm of Young, Conaway, Stargin and Taylor. And also here is Michael Stafford, an attorney and syndicated columnist whose work has been featured on MSNBC. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You know, Governor Markell's State of the State address hit the usual notes of creating jobs. That was to be expected. But he did put in a big section for help in Wilmington, and he kind of couched it as, quote, downtown development district, and he wants to allot $7 million towards these projects. What do you think about that proposal, and how do you think it will play out in the legislature? Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Well, I think my understanding is that there may be a little bit of misunderstanding that a lot of that money is going to go solely for Wilmington, but that's really not the case. I mean, I can tell you specifically that there are projects, large projects in other municipalities, particularly Dover, that would greatly benefit from the money that's available. And I think once the General Assembly begins to see those, particularly in Dover, that they have to drive past every day, I think that opinion will change. And it should change because it's necessary. I mean, there are projects on the books right now that need that funding, and the funding's not there.
It is likely, though, that Wilmington, being the largest city, will probably get the lion's share of the money, don't you think, Michael?
I would tend to agree. I mean, Wilmington is, our largest city. It's sort of the economic engine driving the state. But I would agree with Stephanie. I mean, there's going to have to be a pitch to downstate legislators that some of this funding is going to be available for projects in their own community, because just traveling around the state, Wilmington's not the only downtown area that's in dire need of some beautification.
The next subject we're going to touch is Ban the Box. It's a bill aimed at curbing recidivism, and what it would do is eliminate that box that, say, so a convicted felon would have to check saying they have a criminal history. And this would be for public sector jobs with the state, for example. What do you think about it, Michael?
Well, I mean, it's just to note, I mean, it is a little bit broader than just the public sector, because we're talking also about state contractors, and I think that's an important thing for people to note. From a public policy perspective, it is a national embarrassment. Our incarceration rates, our rates of recidivism, the barriers to reentry that many of our ex-convicts face when they try to reenter the community. So at that level, sort of at 25,000 feet, it's all great. The devil's in some of the details. And looking at House Bill 167, I do have some concerns, particularly with respect to how it's going to play out for contractors who are working with the state.
Why is that a concern, the contractor angle?
Well, for a couple of reasons. I mean, state agencies have some tort immunity that isn't available to private sector contractors. When you look at House Bill 167, there are time limits on how far back the criminal convictions that we're looking at when we do run these background checks after a conditional offer of employment has been made. There's time limitations on that. The second thing, and frankly my primary area of concern, is there are 4 specific criteria that an agency or a contractor that's made a conditional offer of employment to an individual are supposed to consider when they get that criminal background check information back in making a determination whether or not they're going to proceed with the offer of employment. If I'm an HR generalist at a contractor doing business with the state and I'm looking at these criteria and I'm trying to weigh them, that's a little bit of a concern. And in particular, keep in mind that there could be potential tort liability for a contractor for a wrongful hire, for creating, a dangerous workplace, something along those lines. And so I think that's an issue that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more in the General Assembly, particularly when the bill goes to the Senate.
Now, this isn't exactly saying, this is not a guarantee of a job,
Correct.
but overall, though, do you like the idea?
Yeah, I mean, what it's generally trying to get at is that weeding out of people with criminal backgrounds just at the paper application stage. So we're going to make a stack of everybody who's disclosed that they have a felony conviction, and we're going to put them in one pile, and that pile's going to go in the trash can or the shredder. We're not even going to look at them.
Yeah.
And then we're going to focus on the people who don't. The idea that if this information is disclosed later on in the process, after we've already interviewed you, we obviously, if you get to the interview stage, there's something about you that we like. Maybe we think you're a good fit. We've met you, so you're not just a piece of paper with a name on it. Laudable and probably necessary. But again, the devil's in the details. And when you start talking about, again, an HR generalist at one of these contractors weighing questions about, is the position similar to the circumstances that led the person to commit an offense in the first place? I'm not so sure those people are equipped to make those kinds of calls. And so from a liability perspective, you run into, am I as a contractor going to face claims? Because we've created a new unlawful employment practice. So am I going to get a claim against me by the applicant saying I inappropriately applied these exclusionary criteria? Or conversely, am I going to get it wrong, hire somebody, something bad happens in the workplace, maybe to one of my other employees or to a third party, and then I have some tort liability for the hire and I'm going to face a claim, that it's a negligent hiring kind of situation.
Well,
that's my concern.
They are calling it a foot in the door bill. I mean, do you share some of Michael's concerns, Stephanie?
Well, I think it's a necessary step. I mean, I think the Ban the Box initiative is a necessary step, along with the ability for folks to keep their driver's license, because that's another thing. You can, just because they get a job, now they got to find a way to be able to get back and forth to the job. Those are two things that really have to work together. I think that certainly there are problems that are going to arise, like Michael has said, but just because there are going to be some bugs that you're going to have to work out doesn't mean you don't take the steps forward. This may clearly be a situation where we're 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Let's take a look and see how this is being implemented, and we'll make some changes going forward.
All right, transportation time. The governor and the state of the state's proposing $1.1 billion over 5 years. That's an extra $500 million increase towards infrastructure transportation. Stephanie, we were talking earlier about it. What do you think about that kind of money, a big chunk of money going towards the roads?
I think that we've been doing a lot with transportation lately. I'm glad that we've gotten a lot of our transportation, some of our big transportation projects underway. I think that if what we're really looking at is job creation, if the underlying reason for doing all this is job creation and trying to build more than we have, is to take a look at something, at doing this a little bit differently. Let's spend our time and more time and energy and resources in actually pairing public-private partnerships, like, for instance, DuPont with the University of Delaware, and identifying entry-level skills that people are going to need, making skills then correlate with the courses that are being taught, and then offering the internships when they leave the University of Delaware for that. That's the sort of thing that I think you'll get more bang for your buck if you do, rather than continuing to put money into transportation projects.
Do you think our roads need work?
Well, as a Middletown, now come on, now how can I say no to that question? Look, as a Middletown guy who commutes up past Christiana Mall every single day, I am a beneficiary of some of the investments in transportation improvements that have been made here in this state. I mean, the interchange, the flyovers, it's a smoother commute. I think we can all say that. I know Stephanie has experience with the same exchange. Is that where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck? I'm not sure. I mean, when we look at transportation, in infrastructure projects, one of the issues we're trying to address is, commute times, livable communities, the impact of transportation delays on the cost of doing business, those sorts of things. Stephanie may kick me under the table for saying this, but to me, the bigger issue in Delaware is almost how we do development, and that if we are gonna spread sprawl out there, and build over every farm field in Lower Newcastle County between Middletown and Dover, then we're going to have problems with transportation, we're going to have problems with commute times, we're going to have problems with our infrastructure. And so to me, that's a discussion that really, really has to happen and might be a necessary one.
And the balance of that is density, because
Yes.
if you don't spread out development, then you're concentrating it. And when you concentrate development, the neighbors get upset.
Correct.
Because who wants high density housing next to them, even if high density isn't exactly high rise apartments and whatnot.
Right. Well, and it goes back to access to public transportation. I mean, we are living in an age where transportation costs, fuel, those sorts of things, we can expect those costs to be going up. There's going to be, as the population in Delaware ages, we know there's going to be more pressure put on public transportation services, because that's a demographic that uses those things more than younger folks. Are we structuring our development in a way that's going to make those services accessible in a reasonable way to the people who are going to need to use them? I'm not sure the answer is yes.
Well, obviously, how we pay for all of this is the big question. So, no kicking going on here.
No,
I'm
I
glad
have not
to
been
see
kicked.
it.
I've not been kicked.
Okay, well, Stephanie Hansen, Michael Stafford, we will hold the conversation right here for now.